Hey guys, welcome back to House Parties. I hope you're eating a cookie on a couch right now and you're just really soaking up all the vibes. You might see that this is a little different. I'm not Dan, and this is just a different vibe we're bringing. I actually have a special friend here, but before that gets started, I'm Braylon. I'm currently a senior in high school and I get to intern here at the church, which is really fun, but this is my friend.
Friend, that's right. Friend and pastor John. I've probably met a lot of you before, but if not, John, and people get confused on how to say the last name. Not that important, but McLarnon. So I just get to be one of the pastors here.
Okay, so we're just going to be diving deeper. We started a series for Chaos and honestly the whole church. It's called By Faith. And so we just have John here to answer some questions, just these burning questions that you're probably all wondering. I guess the first question is going to be, so why talk about faith with our church?
Why talk about faith with our church? Well, I sit in a different seat than anybody else in our church or even on our staff, and so I kind of see a lot more than everybody else sees. So I think I'm looking ahead down the road a little bit, and some things I think I know are coming our way or that I feel like God wants us to step into. And I was like, okay, that's going to require people to have some faith. So it was kind of on my mind. And then this summer we were hanging out with a grandkid. Yeah, we got grandkids. I'm not that old. But just like with them at the pool, and I'm watching our grandson Ellis, and the way he jumps in the pool is just a jump with his arms down to his side. Like there's just he has no plan other than he can see his dad in the pool, and he is hoping that his dad is going to catch him. And I was just watching that going, okay, he believes that his dad is really good. So it just kind of gave me a picture for us as a church to go, okay, well, I would love for us to have that same confidence in God. So that's kind of how we ended up there.
That's so good. I love that. Grandchildren are the best. Okay, number two is going to be, what is your hope for our church through this series? Like, what do you want to happen, like, at our church?
Well, yeah, I think that is my hope. Like people understand what it is to have faith, and faith starts with faith in God, and then, faith in believing that God is promising you something that if you were to take a step that you maybe don't know how it's going to turn out, is confusing. You probably got questions about it, but if you could take that step, you're believing about God what Ellis believes about his dad, that, okay, there's a promise, like, I'll catch you and you won't drown and it'll be okay, but you're going to have to take a step off of the edge of the pool. So that was it. And, because I think, and you guys understand this too, like much of what we do as far as attending church, or even what some people say, okay, I'm a Christian, it doesn't require faith at all. There's just things that we do. And so I'm like thinking, all right, well, I really want us to be able to trust God to the point that we'll do some things that he says and go where he calls us, even though we don't know how it's going to turn out.
I love that. Okay, now we're going to get into some scripture. So we're spending time in Hebrews 11. So why did you choose that?
Probably just because a couple of reasons. One, my whole life just reading the Bible and growing up in church, it's really corny, but there's all these people that are listed in Hebrews, and it just has this phrase, what they did by faith, and it got called the Hall of Faith, kind of like the Hall of Fame. It's really dumb. That's why I haven't said it in front of the whole church. But
I actually wrote my notes.
yeah, but it's just people listed one after the other, and it just tells us what they did by faith. And so for me, it was just like, all right, I need concrete examples of people who have done this, because we build it up in our mind sometime, like what did they do? And here you get to read the real story.
That's really good.
I don't know who wrote it, don't know who they wrote it to, but they wrote about specific people, mostly from the Old Testament, and what their faith story was.
Okay, now we have a quote that y'all might have heard at Rush, but we have been saying it on Sunday mornings as well. So it is, you define faith as not being a leap into the dark, but a step into God's promises. Can you explain that to us a little bit more?
Maybe. I don't know where that came from. I feel like it's had to have come from somewhere, and then I just formed it into that sentence. But I think sometimes people think of faith as, I'm just going to jump into this thing and I have no idea what's going to happen. And so it's kind of that leap into the dark, I guess. But really what we're doing is God has made a promise to us. And it might be as simple as him saying, hey, the promise is I'm with you, or I'm here, or you are enough. That's the promise, okay? And so we're not just blindly doing these things that we think God is asking us to do. It's like, okay, I'm going to do it. Don't know how it's going to work out or how I'm going to get there, but I'm counting on that promise from God.
I love that. All right. The next one is going to be, so we are looking at our first example of a person who lived with that kind of faith. So will you break down the story of the writer is talking about in Hebrews with this first story?
Yeah, the very first example that you get is, it says of Abel, and Abel is one of the sons of Adam and Eve, and I think he gets mentioned first because he lived first. I mean, it's just like not rocket science on that one, but in the example, it just literally says in Hebrews that he gave a better sacrifice than his brother. And we don't get a lot of details about it, so you literally have to go back to find the story in Genesis where you get all the details to it, but that's all it says. He gave a better sacrifice, and what made it better was he gave it by faith, which would lead you to believe his brother didn't give by faith.
All right. Now, next question is going to be, how do generosity and faith go hand in hand?
Well, if you go back to Genesis and you read the story, Cain is the older brother, Abel's the younger brother. Abel's a shepherd, Cain's a farmer. And there's just some interesting words in there. If y'all reading that tonight?
I think so.
Okay,
yeah.
awesome. You'll read it in Genesis, but you better read it or you won't understand what we're talking about. But it just says, there's some interesting words. It says Cain gave some of his crops, but Abel gave the first. And then it says the fat portion, so the very best part of his animals. And they both gave these offerings to God. And so I think that's the key right there, where it doesn't take faith to give some or what's left over. It takes faith to give what Abel did the first and what I would call the very best. And then God goes, okay, I like that one, not that one so much. And then Cain got mad at his brother when he was really mad at God, and he's like, hey, let's go out to the field and have a talk. And then only one of them came back. So
that's some lore dropping for you guys. Get deeper into this story. It's pretty good. The next is going to be, what does it look like for a student to give first and best opposed to what is left over?
That's a great question that you could probably help answer, but I think, probably not everybody has a job. I mean, when you're looking in the Old Testament and God says, hey, bring something to me, make a sacrifice, bring an offering. People are bringing corn and they're bringing animals and all this. We would bring money because that's kind of how it translates, to today. But I know not everybody has money,
Right.
Not everybody has a job, not everybody gets an allowance, whatever it is these days. But that would be the first thing. Like, hey, if I receive anything at all, then I'm going to find a way to honor God with it first. But I think there's probably if you have a talent, you're really skilled at something, you say, okay, I can offer this as a way to worship God. I have limited amount of time. If I can give some of my time as an offering, so to speak, but maybe you got ideas for.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do have a job and I do make money, so I do pay like give generosity and whatnot. But I think especially as students, time is kind of limited, and so I think it's just giving your best. Like, we obviously can doom scroll on TikTok and all that, but just taking that and being like, well, maybe spending time with Jesus would have been a little better, or just giving off the best you can to represent him to others. And it's just just the way you worship him, and just, I don't know, it's harder to be generous as a student, I guess. But I think it depends on how you're viewing it, because it doesn't just have to be giving money or whatever. But yeah, I don't know.
I think the principle is first and best.
Right.
So it could be how I start my day. Okay, the first of the day, and what is the best I can offer God in this moment. All right, I don't got a lot of cash right now, but but I think when you do, I do think the principles when we read about Abel and giving is that his example of living by faith was giving by faith.
Right.
And so, you're never too young, I don't think, to start some of those practices. And it doesn't have to be big, you can start small. But still, I think you're just trying to honor God, because in the end, the larger idea is God owns everything. And so we're literally just kind of honoring him and saying, okay, as a thank you for what you're allowing me to have, let me just go ahead and throw a nod your way for first and best.
All right, guys, we're going to do one last question, and then we're going to go ahead and end this. Sad. Okay, so when did you personally start giving by faith, and how did that change your walk with God?
Well, I can answer that two ways. One, I can talk about when I first started giving, and it's the way that we taught our kids to give, because we actually bought these little, they're like piggy banks is what they were, and they were broken up into three sections, and this one said bank, and this one said store, and this one said church. And so every week we gave them 3 quarters, and you put a quarter in each one. So if you want to go to the store, you got to see if you have any money in there. And this one's saving in the bank, but the church one was they got every week they took it with them to church. Now, they're given 33%, which was amazing because it's like you're given a quarter every week, but it wasn't theirs. But we're just trying to teach them the habit of, hey, you take an offering to the church. For me, that's the same way I started giving. My parents are like, here's $1 as you're heading into Sunday school, and go give it. But I think it was just something I started developing before I got married, so that when Chris and I got married, she was practicing it as well, and so it was just natural for us to keep doing it. I mean, I remember being at church camp as a middle schooler and hearing about. There's a passage that we did talk about, Malachi chapter 3, and the guy who was speaking was like, listen, if you give today, basically by faith, here's what God says. God's saying to test me and challenge me, and I'll make sure that, I take care of you. And so it's just kind of a crazy example, but I gave all the money I had to the missionary of the day at the camp, and then I went to the last canteen and sat in the corner, and I didn't have anything to eat or drink. And then someone came along and bought me something, and I was like, look, God provides,
God
So it's kind of like an instant, promise fulfilled. So
I love that. That's good. All right. Well, thank you so much, John, for coming and answering these lovely questions we had for you. Hopefully you'll be back, and guys, make sure y'all come on Sunday mornings. We'll have some other people doing it too. I think Dan's doing one, and Matt. So we'll just see how that goes. But I'm just kidding. It's going to be great. It's going to be
love
great.
it. Thanks.
Okay. Bye, guys.